As you can imagine, the life of a pirate was varied, unpredictable, and often at times chaotic. A pirate's daily schedule varied greatly depending on which crew he or she was a part of, but there were many similarities and consistencies across the board, which we're going to be exploring in today's video. Today we will be looking at one single, particularly eventful day in the life of a single, unnamed pirate operating in the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy. But before we get into it, there are a series of things which are important to note. Firstly, the day we are about to describe does not represent every single day in every single pirate's life. This is a fictional yet historically accurate account of what would be one of the more eventful days in the life of a pirate. It was rare that a pirate would find his or herself in combat every day, and single scores were often enough to sustain a pirate crew for long periods at a time. Even the most prolific and successful pirate captains typically gained such wealth from a small slew of raids or boardings. Secondly, we have aimed to be as generic as possible across the board to provide the highest degree of insight into what a pirate's life could have possibly been like on a day-to-day basis. Now with our comment shields up, let's take to the seas as we explore a typical account of a day in the life of a golden age pirate. Welcome to Walk the Plank. A pirate would typically rise with the sun. In the rough conditions of sleeping below the deck of a pirate ship, you can imagine that this routine would start very early in the morning, perhaps at 5 or 6 o'clock as the first light begins to crack through the peak of the horizon. Pirates would more often than not sleep on the gun deck. This was the deck below the surface level of the ship, where rows of heavy, deadly cannons lined the interior in case of attack. Rising groggily from their hammock, a pirate would pull themselves down to the ground and stow their makeshift bedding in a compartment or bag specific to that individual. Conditions below the deck were unpleasant to say the least. Seasickness caused by the battering of waves against the side of the ship, the general noise of the ocean, and the stressful lifestyle endured by a typical pirate would be enough to deprive many individuals of sufficient levels of sleep. What's more is that poor hygiene and even disease were rife on board these ships. Many pirates went weeks or even months without access to soap or medicine, meaning that coughing, wheezing, and general stench stood in the way of a pirate trying to lay down his or her head at the end of a day. Add to that the fact that the general climate of the Caribbean at the height of summer can reach almost 30 degrees Celsius, and you've got one uncomfortable experience set up. Once the pirate wakes and rises for the day, it was time for the morning routine, if you could call it that. Pirates beginning their voyages would likely have access to soap or hygiene supplies and would, at this stage, allow themselves a brisk wash before tending to their daily duties. But most pirates would need to forego this altogether, having been at sea for a number of weeks with dwindling supplies. The next step was breakfast. A pirate was, unless stocks of food on board the ship were dangerously low, guaranteed a small breakfast, perhaps consisting of a sea biscuit and a few strips of dried or salted meat. It was a meager meal to start the day with, but many pirates needed to take what they could get when out on the high seas. The morning meal was then typically washed down with water or tea, and the pirate could leave the gun deck to receive his or her work duties for the day. A typical pirate's day was not filled with action, but rather intense physical labor to assist with maintaining the condition of the ship should a battle break out. Some pirate crews consisted of hundreds of individuals who each needed to earn their keep by working on board the ship. From the moment a pirate rose, it was customary to begin his or her maintenance duties, which could have taken a range of different forms. Cleaning duties were necessary to keep the ship in a generally hygienic condition where possible. Dirty wood could soon be susceptible to molding over or rotting, and the constant battery of dirty seawater didn't help. As such, many pirates were required to get down on their hands and knees and thoroughly scrub the deck with a type of sandstone known as a holystone. Any undesirable features on the wood would be scraped clean off with proper use, and the wood was cleaned and whitened in the process. Another prominent and often time-consuming job for a pirate was caulking the planks. Combat, as well as general wear and tear, would render a pirate ship with innumerable perforations in the wood, mainly along the joints and edges of the planks. Should these perforations grow to large enough sizes, they could let in gallons and gallons of water. If this wasn't tended to in due course, a pirate crew could soon find themselves overloaded with seawater, running the risk of their ship sinking. To fix these potentially dangerous issues, a pirate or team of pirates would be assigned a bucket of caulk. In the golden age of piracy, a pirate assigned to caulk the planks would typically be given a thick compound of pine tar mixed with hemp and cotton fiber. It was a thick, vicious fluid that would soon harden when exposed to the elements. The caulk was typically smeared into the seams of the wood, ensuring that elemental or physical damage was minimized and the ship could safely carry on about its voyage. Maintenance duties also involved heavy monitoring of the state of all lines and ropes on board the ship, as well as securing the mast and checking for damage on the sails. If any one step in this process was glossed over or avoided, pirates risked massive damage. A falling mast could kill any people in the way of its path, destroying the sails and rendering a ship useless. On top of this, a typical pirate crew would have been composed of a leadership team consisting of the captain and their right-hand men, as well as a navigational team responsible for steering the ship on the correct course, a cook or series of cooks, and those that would be tasked with manning the weapons. It was a delicate and yet immaculate ecosystem, where every pirate was assigned a task. Consequently, life on board a pirate ship was very physically demanding, resulting in the average pirate both looking and feeling exhausted after just a morning's work. On days where actual acts of piracy were on the cards to be committed, it was very much a case of all hands on deck for a crew. Once orders were given by the captain or the men underneath his or her immediate command, each pirate on board would poise themselves for a fight. This meant manning the guns, arming one's person, and being fixed to repair any potential damage in an urgent manner. A typical boarding in the event that a merchant ship was spotted may have gone a little something like this. In the first instance, the pirates would simply threaten their target. The Jolly Roger was raised, the ship sailed towards its quarry, and the merchants on board were given the chance to surrender in exchange for their goods and treasure on board. If the surrender was accepted, the crew could peacefully board the ship and empty it of valuables. If the surrender was not accepted, a bloody fight could ensue. Pirates would, in this circumstance, proceed to launch grappling hooks overboard, pulling the merchant ship within a safe range to leap over and board. To weaken the ships, it is possible that cannon fire could have been exchanged prior to boarding. Once the pirates had boarded the ship, it was carnage. Cutlasses, pistols, grenades, and knives clashed in a desperate bid to take the treasure on board the target ship for themselves. Men on both sides often lost their lives in these clashes, but pirates would often come out on top. If the merchant ship did not surrender before the end of the battle, it was possible for pirates to slaughter entire crews, either taking the ship for themselves or leaving the remaining crew with the once bountiful skeleton of a vessel, and nothing more. Eventually, a pirate crew would be given the chance to dock at a safe port, perhaps Nassau or Tortuga, for example. Here they could find a number of local fence merchants who would be able to purchase their stolen goods for a very impressive price. Some pirates would find themselves with the equivalent of millions of dollars or pounds, which they would not wait to spend. It was dangerous for a pirate to be caught with massive amounts of money, especially if those pirates were already known to the law. Therefore, once a pirate was able to successfully dock, all of the money obtained from selling the stolen goods was typically spent very quickly, almost always in one go. Weaponry, upgrades and repairs for the ship, alcoholic drinks, food, and new clothing were just some examples of what the spoils of a pirate crew's plundering funded. Of course, pirate captains would filter down winnings to their crew members, who were free to spend their coin as they wished. Whilst the captain found his or herself with more of the earnings, the rest of the spoils were typically split evenly amongst the rest of the members of the crew. With the ship stocked up, a pirate crew could safely return to the waves, where the cycle would repeat itself all over again. The demanding days of a pirate's life would still allow some room for relaxation, nonetheless. Many pirates on board the ships would often bring friends, and pirates would often gather to sing sea shanties as they sailed across the Caribbean. Some pirates would even bring musical instruments on board the ships, whereas some crews would actually hire musicians to join them on their excursions. To accompany the music, many pirates would dance in their spare time, celebrating their achievements over a well-earned alcoholic drink. While it was not uncommon for pirate captains to be able to read and write, some of their crew members may have not been able to. In these instances, literate pirates would occasionally tutor the illiterate ones as a way of passing the time, and when they weren't teaching, they would often relax with a book themselves. Other pirate hobbies including practicing with weaponry in the event of a combat situation, and tending to the livestock carried on board the ships. Although for many, these two pastimes were compulsory to ensure the survival of the crew. As the day came to a close, a pirate would reverse the steps from the beginning of the day. An evening meal was enjoyed, typically with a more substantial calorie intake to it than the one consumed at breakfast. Pirates with the means of keeping themselves clean would proceed to wash before hanging up their hammock and settling in for the night, ready to repeat the process in the morning. The sea was an unforgiving and harsh realm for the pirates in the golden age of piracy, but they managed, and often well. Though the risk of disease, combat, poor hygiene, and lack of food reared their heads often, the rewards, when they paid off, outweighed the risks entirely. It was a harsh life, but one many chose to experience. So, after watching this video, what do you think? Would the pirate life have been the life for you? Let us know in the comments, and I'll see you next week for another video. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified of it. Cheers!